Okay, well, we'll get started because we have quite a bit of cover today, and we only have an hour or so to go. So, call this meeting to order at 10:03. I'd like to start off with a territorial announcement. We respectfully acknowledge that the SFSS is located on traditional unceded territories of Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, and Katzie nations. Unceded means that these territories have never been handed over, sold, or given up by these nations, and we are currently situated on occupied territories. Okay, I'd like to do roll call attendance. Just unmute yourself and give your name and pronouns and access needs. Okay, I'll start out with myself. My name's Corbett. Pronouns are he, him, his, and all my access needs are met. VP Student Life.
My name is Jennifer, she, her pronouns, and all my access needs are met.
Thank you. Applied Science Harry is still not in yet. Business representative.
My name is Maytab. My pronouns are he, him, his, and my access needs are met.
Thank you. At-large representative.
Hello, my name is Poom. My pronouns are he, him, his, and all my access needs are met.
Thank you. And we have staff with us today. Executive Director.
Good morning, Sylvia Cesaro. She, her, hers. I have still a terrible headache, so I'm pretty wiped.
Sorry to hear that, Sylvia. I hope you feel better soon. Finance Manager.
Good morning. My name is Rowena. She, her, hers. All my access needs are met. However, my technology skills aren't always the greatest, but I have technical support around the house.
Okay. Executive Assistant.
Hi, good morning. Shanika Blake, she or hers, and all my access needs are met.
And Administrative Assistant.
Hi, I'm Christine, she, her, hers, and all my access needs are met.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So next, moving on to the adoption of the agenda. Be resolved to adopt the agenda as presented. Do I have, my mistake. Do we have any amendments to the agenda? Seeing no amendments, I move to adopt the agenda as presented. Do I have a mover?
Poom moves.
Thank you, Poom. Do I have a seconder?
Jennifer seconds.
Thank you, Jennifer. So Poom moves, Jennifer seconds. All those in favor, I will seek for unanimous consent. If you dissent, please unmute your mic. Seeing no dissent, motion is carried unanimously. Hard word for me to say. Matters arising from the minutes. Be it resolved to receive and file the following minutes from FAC committee from April 17th. Is there any discussion on this item? Any matters arising? I see none, so I'll move on to the motion. Be resolved to receive and file the following minutes. FAC 2020, April 17th. Seeking unanimous consent. If you dissent, please unmute your mic. Seeing no dissent, this passes unanimously. It's carried unanimously. Now on to reports. Review of the 2019-2020 community work, finished projects, and continuing projects.
Hi, Corbett, I need to interrupt you. There were no movers and seconders for the motion 5, so the motion cannot carry without movers and seconders, so we need to go back and do the motion again.
Thank you very much. Just first meeting nerves.
No worries.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll revisit that. Can I give a mover for the motion to resolve to file and to receive and file the following minutes?
Jennifer moves.
Okay, do you have a seconder?
Poom seconds.
Thanks, Poom. So Jennifer moves, Poom seconds. All in favor? Please unmute your mic if you have dissent. Seeing no dissent, this carries. Moving on to reports. 6.1, review of the 2019-2020 committee work, with specifically 6.11, finished projects, and 6.12, continuing projects. Rowena, would you be able to talk about this?
Sure. For the, let's see, so 6.11, there are some projects that happen every year, that being the annual general meeting. The VP Finance does a report, and that was presented as filed. Other finished, as you know, the investment policy was written, reviewed, and approved. I would say the finished, I think it's up to the committee to decide. The fall kickoff was quite a big issue last year with preparing budgets and costs and meetings and such. Potential review of that. From where I see now, it's completed. We are having the annual audit, which I can touch on later, but that was a finished product. I was not there for the whole year. I started in July. Shanika, do you have anything to add to the finished projects?
No, the fall kickoff was the biggest one we had.
Okay. Yes, I would say those would be that. Now for, shall I go to continuing projects? Okay.
Sorry, Brianna, the other finished project that we did obviously was to put together and present the 2020-21 budget to the previous board for approval. Yeah. And the other project that we also finished was cobbling up the policy by which the coordinators will be able to process the expenditures of any given committee under their purview as per the amount allocated by the board to that committee. Because last year was the first year we did that, and there was a bit of a confusion for the coordinators on how to go about that. So we put a policy in place on how to make it happen so that we're also able to roll it up and showcase it to the board. So that was also another finished project. And the other finished projects, which were also under finance, was the renewal of the insurance, which just came to be signed, and sorry, my headache is really bad. I'll think of it. Sorry, insurance, and the other one was. Sorry, I'll think of it and I'll come back. Thank you.
I can add to that. There was 2 finished projects. We can talk about the sub at some point, but the sub was financed under a variety of methods from Scotiabank. The one was called the construction loan for when the construction was started, and then it was going to switch to more of a traditional mortgage when the building was completed. Now, even though the building is not completed, we decided to make that change to the more traditional mortgage, and that happened in September. When it was interest only for 3 months, and then now we are paying principal and interest on the loan for the sub. So I think that's partly finished, because that part of the loan has been paid, but been replaced by another loan, which is continuing.
Thank you, Rona. And I'm sorry, I was going to mention that, so thank you for mentioning that. The other project that is finished that is around the sub was the leases for the commercial tenants. And for the information of the committee, the leases for those who will occupy the first floor were just sent to the president a couple of days ago. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Actually, before we move into continuing projects, is there any questions from committee members about finished projects?
List.
Go ahead, Matab.
I just have a question regarding the mortgage. Are the documents available for us to look over?
Yeah, I can make those available. Perhaps I can put together a briefing note. The loan is an interest rate swap, which is something that, so it doesn't look like if you have a mortgage on your house or a car loan, you would see, on your bank statement, a payment, which is partially interest and principal.
Yeah.
But this, a swap is more complicated than that. I know I can put together something that explains a swap. In short, when we signed the agreement, we set a rate of interest, but the actual interest rate changes with the market. Right now it's down over but we're still paying the rate that we committed to when we did the swap.
Okay.
Me again, sorry. I just realized that the other project that was finished that had a financial impact on the organization and other impacts, but for the Finance Committee is the agreement with FIC.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Mitab, there's also kind of a small summary for the swap and the loan and stuff with our audit reports from past years. I don't know if it's the most up to date, but that's also some other additional documents that you can look at. So that's just for my own memory. Any other questions? I'm seeing no questions, so if you would like to continue to continuing projects, please.
So continuing projects, at the end of last year, it was raised that we look into a risk register for the society, and given the times and just overall, I think it's best practices for every organization to have a risk register. This covers financial items as well as non-financial items, but certain things are, do we have adequate insurance coverages? What are the risks to the society's revenues? What happens, in a disaster? Those are some. That's not an exhaustive list, but some of the things that are on a risk register. And I certainly think that that's something that the society should continue, especially that we've seen having, completely changed our way that we do our work. So to document things that we have done even, and to have other points to carry forward. So that was, I think that was in February or March that was on the Finance Committee agenda, and that was passed. The continuing projects, now that we have the investment policy, the next part would be to implement that. And to that end, there was a call with our VCIM, who is our investment manager, the other day that Corbett and Osip attended, as well as Sylvia and me. The continuing projects. I think from my point of view, reviewing the transactions as they happen can bring up continuing projects and just policies that need to be updated. For example, Corbett had asked me about the board reimbursements, which is something that happens but hadn't been documented. So I think as we go on, to have these processes documented and formalized potentially, and reviewed regularly by the board. The standing operating procedures for finance need a refresh. They were, I believe, 2018 was when they were updated. I can say that the basic processes of finance are most likely the same, but we do need to refresh those and bring in new items as the committee sees fit.
Sorry, this is Sylvia again. I just want to add to what Rowena is saying, that we discussed the risk management plan with the previous finance committee and the chair of the committee, and we had a few false starts around that because there was no consensus as to whether it should just be a risk registry or an enterprise-wide risk management. And I did advise at the time that it should be an enterprise-wide risk management because of the financial aspects of the sub and so on. And dovetailing to that, I did ask Corbett to put it on this agenda. We spoke with the previous chair of the committee about having a fiscal plan that dovetailed to the risk management plan and a financial plan that dovetailed to it too. And tied to it would be the budget and the strategic plan, all of which makes in the best run to nonprofits a whole package. So when you're advancing one thing, you're keeping an eye on everything at the same time. This is a monumental task. It's not, a 2 weekends type thing or a 2 weeks type thing. So we would need to settle on whether this is going to happen and how this is going to happen. And the other two projects that we have on the go, obviously the audit, which I'm sure we're going to touch on, as well as the current lease between SFSS and SFU. There's a couple of places where we are looking at asking for changes. And the last one tied to the sub, obviously, is the potential claim by the contractor for excess in construction. They don't have a foot to stand on, but that could have also a financial impact on the organization if it comes to bear.
Okay, thank you.
Part of the ongoing is with the sub project. We are nearing completion, and the cash flow for the sub, which shows how much we're going to collect, what it's going to cost, what it's going to cost to run the building, and how we're going to pay down the loan. I updated that at the end of last year, but I do believe there have been potentially material changes to that cash flow. There's many moving parts to that. First and foremost, we want to make sure that the sub is funded, not only to pay the mortgage, but also to pay for the ongoing operations, because our current operating budget, I don't think it could fully cover, let's say, expanded operations with the sub, including related to managing the building. So that is a project that I am looking at quite carefully at the moment. We have been working remotely for a few months now, and I believe that this is the new normal for at least a few more months. And certainly there are ways that finance can make things more streamlined and such. I think there's touching on some things in the discussion items, but that's an ongoing project to adapt our formerly in-person operations to something that is remote, and you'll be able to do all of the work that we do and have as few touch points as possible in the office.
Sorry, me again. Another project that will be on the go would be the collective agreement bargaining sessions, and that will have an impact not only on the finances of the organization, but as well as the potential operating costs for SFSS, because as you probably all know, that when you bargain normally, and the union has signified that they're looking at it to be a quick bargaining round of bargaining, and that to me normally signifies that they're looking more at the financial piece than anything else. So there will be cost associated with that, depending on when this is all negotiated. So
I can speak a bit to collective bargaining. I have been involved in collective bargaining on the management side in the past, either as on the committee, on the labor committee, but the finance part of the role is to, cost out any of, increases or benefit increases, weighed out to any potential savings. So that is how I have supported collective bargaining in the past. And I've done a little bit of work as far as potential increases and how that might affect our annual financial statements. The budget that was passed has everything as status quo, so that will change if there are changes in the collective agreement.
Oh, I realized I was completely muted for the whole time. Okay, I wanted to say, due to time constraints, I'd like to move on to the next item, 6.2, annual audit progress. Reno, can you speak on that?
Sure. So the annual audit is conducted by a firm called Tompkins Wasney, and as far as I know, they've been the auditor for the society for many years. There are pluses and minuses for that. I can say that I dealt with them last year and found they have the knowledge of the business, and especially with an elective board that changes, they do have continuity. Tompkins Wasney is not one of what we call the big four firms. So typically their costs are going to be lower for the society. Also, we have pretty good access to the partner when we have needed his help, as well as the audit manager. So the audit starts on Monday, but they will not, typically the auditors come on site to an organization for a week or two and have meetings, test items, upload files, etc. This year, it is going to be remote. So all of the files that they have requested, we will send to them. There are certain things that they will need copies of or originals of, and we will implement that, whether we courier to them or I drop them off to the auditors. We'll see that. The annual audit. They did send some letters, which we had distributed to the Finance Committee, which explains a little bit about the audit. In my experience, I've been involved as an auditor, as well as on the other side, preparing the financial statements. When I think some of you were there when the presentation from BDO about the internal versus external audit. So in that letter that I forwarded, it talks about materiality. So materiality is a big thing about the audit. So an audit isn't going to look at every single check we've written or every transaction on the banking statements. They want to review the financial records and say that they are not materially, MNP, sorry, not BDO, that they are not materially misstated. Now, they mentioned materiality in that letter, and I believe it's $80,000. So it is quite, and it's $80,000 because we are a large organization, but that's something that might be a difficult concept to get over because that's quite a big number. But I can say that in my years as an auditor, you look at certain things. If they look good and you trace them to the source documents, then it is, likely that the systems are in place. So the auditors test our systems to make sure our expenses authorized, are all the people on the payroll real people. Sorry, that's so that's a summary. They do talk about the audit process there. But if any of you have any questions or want a separate note or presentation on that, I'm happy to talk to you about it. The auditor will come in when they've finished their review to talk to the Finance and Audit Committee to go over their findings and for everyone to have a chance to ask questions. That will happen later summer, July, likely. I don't know if our annual general meeting is set, but everything is timed so that the statements are ready, our reports can be done for the AGM.
So, Ron, asked me again. Yes, the AGM was set for the third week of October. I think the 26th, if I remember correctly. And if you could kindly let the auditor know that they don't have to rush as much as they did last year, because we always have to count the time that the AGM is set up and the notice we have to give our members and so on. So last year they went very quickly in order to meet that deadline. With this new AGM set for the third week of October, it gives them a little bit more time.
Oh, okay. Typically they clear that date with the auditor because their attendance might be requested, but given the time, I'm sure he will make himself available. Do you know the time of that meeting?
Hi, Rowena. No, we haven't started the planning as yet,
Okay.
but I'll keep you in the loop.
Okay. We should just reach out to Gary, he's the partner, to say this is the date.
Sure, I'll reach out to him with the date.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions about the audit process?
Yeah, I have one quick question. The 80,000 materiality, can you explain that a little bit more? Is it that the idea of like we can be off a little bit by up to $80,000, and or is that?
Well, so when, let's say our loan with the bank is around $36 million, right? So $80,000 is a very small percentage of that, but they definitely, when they're looking at individual expenses, they are looking at things, less than $80,000. That's a convention. So a user of the financial statements, let's say the bank, will still make the same decisions based on that materiality level. So I would say most companies, or all companies, their books aren't to the penny just due to rounding issues. Things get miscoded sometimes. Let me see if I can find something that explains materiality. That might help give you some comfort. But I can say that materiality is set based on an organization's risk. And I'm guessing that the SFSS in general, because we have good procedures and open books, that we are lower on the risk scale to the auditors. But I'm taking a note so I can find something for you.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the committee?
No questions, but I have a comment, Corbett.
Okay, go ahead.
So for the committee's information is that even though there is an allowance for materiality of $80,000, that doesn't mean that if there is a deviation from the financial statements of $80,000, we all go home and go, oh, that's fine. We look into where that materiality comes from, if it's from rounding, if it's from, miscoded, as Rena was saying. However, it's the materiality is fairly small. I mean, I know that $80,000 sounds like a big number for most people, but for an organization of our size, it is fairly small. And I don't know what the, if you look at previous year statements, we don't have a lot of notes that talk about us deviating or having many issues with, big gaps in most processes. So $80,000 is not a, because people hear $80,000 and they think it's a realized, matter, but it isn't. It's just the threshold.
Okay, sorry.
One of the things that can contribute to, we'll call them miscodings, it's a concept called cutoff, because the society has a year end of April 30th, and items related to that year should get posted to that year. But now let's say it's June right now, and somebody sends in an invoice from a club for $37. We pay it, and maybe it gets posted in this current fiscal year. Is that theoretically the right treatment? No, but we consider that a small amount, and that will get coded to this year. So it's not like it's missing or anything. It's a cutoff thing where things are shifted from one year to the next. So materiality allows for those types of small items.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just also make one comment too that, like, in my own personal research of the SFSS, like, I tracked down and compiled about 20 years of audits and put it all in different spreadsheets and stuff. It was only really 1 year that there was some questionable, like some confusion on it, where there was a sizable discrepancy, which I think it probably was a coding issue. I can bring it back up. I know I talked to past VP finances about it, but it can be something that we can look at in the future, just to clarify what happened in that year. But there's been rarely any, beyond like the odd rounding error, that hasn't really, the numbers seem to always match up. So,
yeah. And some coding issues are philosophical. How, like with accounting theory, is it an asset? Is it an expense? How many years is this going to last us, etc.? So sometimes things are like analyzed differently. So it might not, like, it may look like an error, but it could have been, decided upon to treat something that way.
Okay. Any other questions from committee? Seeing no questions, we'll move on to 6.3, investment policy implementation. Again, I guess Rowena.
Hi, we had a call with Van City. We approved Van City. Their arm of investment management is called VCIM, Van City Investment Management. And I think Asab and Corbett were on the call. I've met with them a few times now, and I've found them quite thorough and not, condescending at all, and very explaining things well. I know that our main thing is to be fossil fuel free, and we need to do some clarification what fossil free means, because every company is tied into energy somehow, whether they use the products, etc. But what is our tolerance as the SFSS? Right now, all of our cash, which is almost $20 million, is sitting with the Bank of Nova Scotia, and you can be sure that they are loaning money to energy, using energy themselves. So I would say that it would be better for the society to diversify, because then we can potentially invest in clean energy companies or companies where now we're a shareholder and we can be part of lobbying groups to companies to pay men and women the same, or to have living wage agreements, etc. The next process is deciding on who should be the signing authorities on that account, and that would be from Vancity's point of view, the money, they don't care how the money gets there, and the money will get there based on the recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee and proper approval that way, signed by 2 signing authorities. But money coming out back to the society needs to be approved by them, or if we want to make any changes, is going to be approved by them. VCIM does investment management for other student societies, and they have suggested to us that is 1 staff member, 1 board member signs off on withdrawals, and the natural fit in this for the SFSS would be the executive director and me and the president and the VP Finance. I think that we should listen to VCIM. They are the here, and I don't think as staff it decreases when we talk about risk, right? If 2 staff are signing off, they're at risk. If 2 board members are signing off, their risk. So both a member of the staff and the member of the board. I think that's what we should do. So I think this committee can decide that, and I can start getting the paperwork organized to do so. The next part, and I think we will need a more robust discussion, is how much to move over to Vancity. I had done yesterday a summary of how much cash we have and some suggestions as to how much we can move. But I think also we should talk about overall society finances and revenues coming in, and and how much money we want to hold within our accounts themselves. Like, none of these things exist in a vacuum. But as far as implementing the policy, we can certainly start with signing authorities and getting that part finalized with VCIM.
Sylvia, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about or add to what Rena was saying, that the fossil fuel piece, we have to engage in a discussion as to what is our tolerance, as she said, because it would be, I think every single organization, every single human being is involved in fossil fuels, whether we like it or not. Simply, the plastics that we have around us, or the gas that we put in our car, or the gas that goes in a bus if it's not natural gas. So we have to understand that it is far-reaching. If we're talking about direct energy, as in fossil fuel energy companies, then that's one thing. So we have to be able to figure that line and try to support and try to invest in companies that are more earth and social justice and all of that friendly, for sure. And there are those companies out there. But in the second piece is, they also spoke about the investment ratios for equity versus other investments. And I think what needs to happen when the risk management plan is done is to talk about risk tolerance and risk appetite by the board. Because if you say our tolerance or appetite is 0 or 1 or 10 or 12, it doesn't matter what that number is that you pick, you need to then figure out what the equity mix is going to be. Because yes, we want the money that we put at Vancity to make money, but also we don't want to be sticking our necks out with students' money. And the last piece on that is that the money that we make out of that, there needs to be a plan as to how that's going to be spent, because we are at a very risky threshold with CRA. And I've been talking about that for a while, where it's fine and good to have millions of dollars in the bank, but if there is no specific plan, and as you all know, we have about 6 months of operational money in case, you know, the organization was to fold or anything like that. But when you have millions of dollars in the bank and you have no plan as to how that's going to be allocated, first of all, I'm glad that the sub is happening, because we can say that part of it is in order to service the debt. But at the same time, we have to be very careful to say, what else are we going to do with this money? How are we going to invest it back into students? What is that going to look like? So that if CRA ever comes to our door, we can showcase that there is a plan for that, that increase in revenues that we will be getting with our investments. And what was the second piece that you talked about, Reno? I'm sorry. This is me with a headache talking finance. I love it.
I tend to ramble. We talked a bit about
the signing authority.
Yes, signing.
Yeah, I think it's also critical that it can never, ever, ever, and I want this on the record very clearly for posterity, it can never, ever, ever be 2 staff members or 2 board members. It needs to be 2 different checks and balances, because you do not want to be in a situation, and we've seen it on both sides of the table, where you have board members who have gone away with money from the organization. And of course, this will never happen here. And we've also seen organizations where the staff has gone away with money from the organization. So it has to be very clear that it has to be a check and balance, so that the students are reassured that we are doing the best that we can with their money and being prudent about it.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from the committee? If not, we will move on to the next item. Seeing no questions, let's move on to 6.4, board reimbursement guidelines. I can do a quick little intro because I was the one who requested this. So I found one with my role that when I pretty much within the first week or so, I had a number of reimbursement requests from previous board members going through, and I was a little confused on things like travel distance, what can be reimbursed for transportation, what could be reimbursed, what was needed for phone bill reimbursements, and things that the board, according to changes over the number of years, what they can reimburse for, how they can reimburse it. And so I asked Ruina if she could, or I asked Ruina if she could get this stuff down on paper so that I could give this to the board. And so all the board comes from, it could be all on the same page and understand what the processes are and what they can and can't reimburse for. So thank you. And Rowena, if you want to add on to that.
Yes, and from what in my research, there's an amount set at some point by some VP Finance, which is rolled over year. Some reimbursements were for executive members only, and then at some point it was, extended to the board, which I think is a good idea. Now, I documented the process, what has happened, which is $50 a month for phone, up to $600 a year for transportation. But I think that might change just because of COVID, and I mentioned that to Corbett. Certain things are taxable, certain things are considered a reimbursement. So when we give you $50 for your phone, that is not taxed at all or subject to tax. But we do need original receipts from the phone company. I know that some people might be on a family plan, so we need to find a way that we have proper documentation for our files that has a number that we know that board member uses, and then that they will be reimbursed. Because of the UPass being suspended, members who are traveling by transit to come to SFU need to pay for a bus pass, and I think a one zone is what, $98, goes about $100 a month. So that if you pass this suspended for, you know, much longer, that could be more than the $600 a year. Right now, parking up at SFU is free for students. So you shouldn't, the board members, if they are parking, that won't be a cost. But I think it's something that this year, it's a special circumstance. We need board members to be able to come here to do their work. And I think that those should be approved. On the flip side, there will be other board members who are mostly working from home and can submit individual transactions on their Compass card, which we would reimburse. So those would be travel from home to campus to do SFSS work, or if there are any, that counts towards the 600. Corbett asked about travel, like to local conferences and stuff. So we do pay a kilometer charge, or pay for bus fare for that, or potentially a taxi, depending on where it is. But that is not included in the limits. One thing that I'd like to work on this year, a more formalized process for reimbursements of travel. Right now, we've been paying for meals and such as the board members travel, but I don't think it's necessarily written down. We approve everything that's reasonable, but it would be good to have guidelines, whether it's a per diem or, you know, a limit on amounts. But I think that's something that would be a good reimbursement for a good policy for the board, and also we could use for staff.
Okay, Sylvia, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. The first one is, I don't know that there's going to be too many conferences that will be in person. However, there are some very interesting conferences, like the one governing during time of emergency, or I can't remember the exact title, but that was, I think, $495. I think that if board members want to attend online conferences that are at a cost, those should be reimbursed. The same for staff if it's part of our professional development. And the other one is, as Rena was saying, there should be a stipend as well for to cover even partially the internet and the wear and tear in people's homes for working from home, that extends to the board as we have it for staff. It's only fair. I mean, we are in our homes using up consuming our own internet, but it is for work and whatever it is. So you might want to consider that as well, so that people are not out of pocket for those expenses.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer, go ahead.
So the parking pass thing for reimbursement was mentioned, but I'm wondering if gas is also reimbursed, because I remember hearing about it last year.
Okay, if it's coming to and from campus, that is not reimbursed. If you're going to a meeting, which this year is an odd year, it probably won't happen, but it's 59 cents a kilometer. That's what the Canada Revenue Agency sets as a limit. So I went to a conference in February downtown. So I did a Google Maps and it shows the kilometers I drove, and I submitted that round trip, 20 kilometers times 59 cents. So that's how gas is paid. But if you're going to Burnaby campus, you cannot claim gas for that. But if you're going to a conference, it's not gas. You have to track your mileage, and that's how you will be reimbursed for gas.
In the briefing note, it says it's for off-campus meetings, conferences, and events. I'm wondering if like a Costco run would count.
Yeah, because if you're using your car, definitely. But we do ask that we need a pretty clear definition of your kilometers. So if you're coming from home, you can do that in one of the mapping programs and submitting that. or if you're coming from school.
And then would just submitting a picture of the map be good?
Yeah, because if you say, home to Costco, it'll say, 12 kilometers, and then you can say times 2. You would submit that. And then the date, because that did come up in one, because the CRA allowance is changed by calendar year. So make sure you have the date of your travels as well. And that wouldn't count towards the $600 annual allowance, because that is over and above commuting to campus.
Okay, I'll let Mantab go, and then Sylvia can be next.
My only concern was, like, let's say for if you're facing technical difficulties at home and you're going to campus just for the meeting or just for the board meeting or just for like a committee meeting. In that case, like especially this year, given the current circumstances, so how would we kind of counter that?
If it were my decision, I like to look. We want to be fair to the students. We don't want them to be out of pocket. And if a student had to be on campus only to attend meetings because technical difficulties were an issue, I think it would be fair to look at the kilometers driven. But I would leave that up to the committee. I don't think it would be a significant amount, and if those would be my comments.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that perhaps part of the confusion about how gas is paid is that if a board member requires to rent a car in order to go to a conference, then that car rental by and large includes the kilometers. So what happens is the board member will then ask for obviously the car rental receipt, but also a receipt for when they fill up, because you always have to bring back a rental car to the level that you obtained it, whether it's full, half full, whatever it is, right? And that, of course, is when I think the only circumstance under which we would pay gas. Many organizations, when you go to a conference, if it's cheaper to rent a car and pay for the gas than to pay for kilometers, that's the preference. Or if you want to use your vehicle, they'll reimburse you to the maximum of what would be cheapest for the organization. But that's the only circumstance under which gas is actually paid, as in you pump it at a gas station. It is because you have a rental car.
I guess that could happen with a car share as well. I mean, I've been members of car share, and if there is no gas, you have to put it in. But let me think. That is often reimbursed by the car share company. So I think it would.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And there's normally a card inside the car that you fill up with.
Yes, I've had issues with some of those cards, but I agree. I agree.
Okay. So we are pretty much running out of time. So either we have two options: we can either table the discussion items for a follow-up meeting, or if the committee and the staff are available, we can extend the meeting in batches of say at least 15 minutes.
I have another meeting at 11. It's our regular senior management team meeting. I will just text them to say that we're going to start 15 minutes late.
I already did, Sylvia.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Committee members, is there any issue extending?
I have a meeting at 11, so
okay.
I'll probably have to head out.
Okay. Being that we have just discussion items, there's no motions, so quorum is not an issue. Any other committee members have any things they have to go to at 11? Okay, whom is good? Okay, so I'll just do a motion. I move to extend the meeting minute till 11:15 a.m. Do I have a seconder? Well, I move it, and then do you have a seconder?
Jennifer seconds.
Thank you, Jennifer. All in favor, seeking unanimous consent, please unmute your mic if you are dissenting. I see no dissent, so that carries, and we will continue with the meeting until 11:15. Okay, thank you. To 7.1 discussion items, I'll give a bit of an overview. The point of this was not so much about us to discuss every single item in detail, more just to give some different ideas on what we could be working on this year. Some of these were submitted by Sylvia and I think Rowena maybe, and some of these I compiled from discussions that we've already had with, say, when we had a development session with the service center, as well as some of our platform points that I found compiled this year. Some of the things I know about, I'll give the introduction, and I'll also ask, like I think Sylvia, to talk about her own things she submitted. Additionally, I would, as an action item, I would request that we submit to the committee a more detailed briefing note for each item as to why we think it'd be useful for us to pursue these actions. And also working with, I'll work with Rowena to try to come up with some rough timelines, see what would be almost like a year-long project versus something that could be done in a month or two. Okay. Does that sound okay for everyone? Sounds good. Okay, so so I'll go to 7.1.1. Implement of the investment policy. We've already kind of discussed this quite a bit. Basically, you just have to continue this, look at the, get some clarification, I think, on things like our personal investment threshold when it comes to fossil fuel and energy connections, as well as signing authority and other stuff. Was there anything else that last minute that just popped in, that came up to anyone about the investment policy?
Well, it's part of that, but we should discuss the amount that we would like to move over.
Thank you. Yep. And then we definitely do that at a future meeting. 7.1.2, discuss enterprise risk management review. This is something Sylvia would like to talk about, I believe.
Yes, so this is a continued conversation from last year with Tawanda Nigel. As I said, we were first thinking of a risk registry. And then, I don't know if the committee members know, but I did a master's certificate in risk management at Schulich, which is York University's business school. And what I learned from that course was that many a time when people talk about risk, they talk about financial risk. However, risk can come from many other sources, and an enterprise-wide risk management is very comprehensive. And it's also tied not only to your budget, but to your strategy as an organization. So that's what I suggested, and we started looking at how we were gonna try to begin the process and so on. The other piece with a risk management, you do what's called a heat map, so that you have events like COVID, which are what's called a black swan, happen once every 100 years, but you then also have events that if they happened, they would be irrelevant but costly, or they would be important and not costly. So you do a heat map to know where your biggest risk, and you focus on those that are the biggest risk for the organization. And what I also look at when I look at risk, normally people talk about risk aversion, right? Like we have to avoid risk, but where there's risk, there is opportunity. And the same as, we were just talking about the investment. Yes, there is a risk in investing because we could lose money, but there is a huge opportunity for making money, which then we can reinvest into enhanced student services and so on. So when we talk about risk, I also have done, and I like to do a heat map of opportunity for the organization. And that's when you tie it to the strategic piece of the organization and when you tie it to the budget, so that you can say, okay, we want to, I don't know, build another sub. And we say that's absolutely very risky, but here is how we could do it and how we put a plan in place in order to do that. Risk, the risk plan can be very comprehensive, and it can be multi-year as well. so that it doesn't stop when this board goes away, right? It continues with the organization as we progress, so that people know where we're at, what happens next, and so on. And what's also the silver lining, I think, for COVID, which is the only silver lining I can find currently, is that I think in the whole history of ourselves, probably, hopefully this doesn't happen for another 100 years, but now we know how to manage a lot of the things that were unknown to us how to manage before, and what needs to be put in place in order to continue for the organization to continue to be sustainable. So these are hard lessons, but they're very good lessons, and they can be in the risk management plan for 100 years to come if this COVID-like event happens again. That could be a rich legacy that we leave for those who will come behind us.
Okay, thank you. I had one question, like what is exactly a risk registry? It's just a list of potential issues, or what gets involved in that? Just so we understand the scope of each thing.
A risk registry is that it's just a list of the things that it's similar to the heat map. Some people call it a risk registry. Some people call it a risk bow tie. It has different names, but basically is listing all the risks and saying which one are high on the list, which one are coded either red, yellow, green, or blue. So you can do that in many ways, but that's basically what it is. You just list the risks. You don't tie it to, the budget. You don't tie it to strategy. You don't tie it to business plans. You don't tie it to any of that. You just do let's keep an eye on these 14,000 things, and you rank them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee? Okay, no questions listed. I have one additional one. Is this something that can be done primarily in-house, or would we have to hire a consultant or a firm to help us with this or do this?
The only thing I can offer up is that I have done 3 enterprise risk management plans for organizations. One was $11 million budget. The other one was a $30 million budget, and $7 million budget. So, and I didn't rely on on an outsider. I relied on my finance team to be able to put it together, and also relied on my board to be able to look at the strategy and say, this is where we want to be in the next 3 years, and also look at the current budget, but also do scenario planning for the future for between. I don't like to go more than 3 years because the world changes so quickly. But the ones that I have done, I've done in-house. If you've never done one, you need to have a consultant for sure, because it's very intricate. There's a lot of moving pieces, and there has to be a lot of conversation, and there has to be a lot of ability to look at the future of the organization and see where do we want to be in 3 years from now. What are the big, hairy goals that we want to give ourselves? Not the day-to-day operations stuff that you delegate to the people who are experts at that, but you need to be in the vibrating with strategy and vibrating with vision. If we're not able to have that as a group, you may as well not even start it, to be honest. I've seen some half-assed, sorry for the word, but some half-assed efforts in putting a risk registry, and what ends up happening, it sits on a shelf.
Okay. Thank you.
I've also worked on risk registers in previous places, so I have some ideas about how we could start structuring SFSS. Like I worked at Vancouver General Hospital, which is a multi-billion-dollar organization, and obviously ours would be dialed down from that. But I think a basic plan is something that we could put together in-house and at least bring it for discussion, because as we've seen this year, who knows what can hit us. And Tawanda did say last year, Sylvia, remember that had we had, I don't know how, had we had a risk register that had talked about disaster, everyone working remotely, we could have had a head start on that.
Yeah, we had started talking about earthquakes and the most likely events that we were thinking could happen living in the Lower Mainland, but never did we think it would be a virus of this magnitude, right?
Right, 100%. We need something on earthquake, as a start.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to jump in. We're getting short on time. Next item, research participatory budgeting. This is a thing I campaigned on. It's the general idea behind participatory budgeting is you set aside a portion of an annual budget for members to pitch ideas and projects and then be able to then vote on which ones get funded. These could be things that benefit the organization or their local community. That's something we'd have to explore on if we want to go forward with this project, to what would be the limitations. The goal of this is generally to democratize some areas of the budgeting process, so it's less of a top-down process for everything, and giving members some impact and be able to improve their organization, something they feel that they've actually directly been involved in. This idea came out of some practice in a city in Brazil. And one of the things that they studied, when people studied it, found that they helped improve engagement, especially with marginalized communities, because often, especially with larger budgeting processes, people that they can be able to access government groups, you often need to have a lot of resources and stuff, and often marginalized communities don't have that. There is some parallel to the SFS in that we have a very broad, diverse group of people. We have so many different clubs, unions, and constituency groups and stuff that operates, and it can be difficult for us and the board being very centralized in their own bubble for us to understand what the needs are for our groups. So I'd like for us to explore this idea, research it throughout. It doesn't have to be done quickly or has to be done now. It could be just like the investment policy could be worked on throughout the year, and then the next board would be one that might be able to implement it. And anything like this would probably start out very small scale for a pilot project, so we wouldn't be risking much of our budget for this if we do go there. Yeah, so that's that item. Any quick questions on that?
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's a great idea for a pilot project. I mean, and I think that's something measurable that can be done this year. I would say, definitely something we could work on through the later summer, fall term, because anything would have to be pitched by early 2021. And to that end, I can even look at the budget now, potentially what sort of magnitude could we offer? It's the same like, in my community, they offer community grants and you pitch them. So I think that would be nice to start that on a small scale.
Yeah. Okay, next item is 7.14, research large-scale event guidelines and fund exploration. So this is partially coming out of the concert that happened. From my perspective, this SFS kind of should have some guidelines around larger scale events, not just concerts, but say we wanted to run a convention, or we wanted to, or some of our clubs. That I think a couple of years ago, one of the business clubs ran a big international case competition here, and we worked with MEX and they ran most of it. But it'd be nice for us to have some guidelines and some ideas about what kind of funding might be needed to help support some of these larger events. So they don't always necessarily have to always go to the board. And we could have like a laundry list of, okay, if we want to work with MEX, this are the things they need for you to have, or for us to have, for this to be effective. So that's where that's coming from my perspective. Any comments, questions?
Corbett, may I? This is Sylvia.
Yep.
Could I suggest that instead of guidelines, we have policy? Because you see, what happens with guidelines is, as we all know, you can kind of guide yourself by them. You see, for me, the 100-kilometer posted on the highway is actually a guideline. I'm kidding, but you know what I mean, right? That you have to be a little bit more strict. And I think a policy saying these are the thresholds, this is what happens. If this doesn't happen, then you need to go to the board, or these are the levels of approval, and so on. Because without that policy, it would be, again, interpretive for some, and we would want it to be more tightly controlled. I would suggest that.
Yeah, no, I agree. The idea of guidelines mostly was the idea of starting to get stuff down on paper, and exploring it. And then, if I can understand the need for a policy for this kind of thing, especially because large scale events would be a large amount of money, and we want to have policies around, financial policies around how that works. Okay, next item, review club and student union funding model. This is something I brought up with the discussion with the clubs and student union coordinators that are, I know the grant process has been reviewed multiple times since at least 2015 for different boards, different results. But on my own, I looked at the funding model and researched the funding model on my own, and I've got some spreadsheets to show my analysis. And I'd like us to do a little bit of a research on our student unions and clubs and see why some seem to be more stable or more successful than others, to see if there's any patterns, whether it's resources, whether it's funding, whether it's supports, or other factors that could be trying to find patterns, and then looking at if we need increased funding, or if we need to shift funding, or have it maybe even a different model completely. I know there was some interest from that, especially with the large scale event too thing from staff and MIN on the club and student union side. And yeah, like one example I want to give for my analysis, what I noticed at least a year or two ago, that on paper, almost half of our student unions receive the smallest amount of core funding, dedicated funding, and that's a question: is that core funding, the base amount of funding, enough, or should it be increased? I don't want to just put money, just change money on and say, hey, that we fixed something. I'd like us to have a more nuanced perspective and more data-driven perspective. Any comments or questions? Liz, Poom?
What do you mean by, like, what's the criterion for being not successful versus successful?
Well, that's a good question too. Like, from my perspective, stability, being able to regularly hold events, having regular elections, not having financial issues, like not having to go to, or having successful events where they don't have to be potentially bailed out by the society. But that is a good question too. Like, what is our view of success for our student unions and clubs, and what is their view of success too? I think there just needs to be a lot more conversation around this and research. Because if we're able to say improve event attendance, or a number of events that happen on average with like our 300 or so clubs and 330 or so student unions, collectively, that's thousands of more students that are engaged every year. So my viewpoint for our role in the board level is to try to find ways to increase, like on average, a lot of our student life groups. I can definitely write this down more into a much more detailed briefing note to explain things, because like we're already over time now. Shoot.
Yes, sorry, and I have to go. We have another meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. We can still discuss. Some of these items are still from my own end. We can still discuss with, unless committee members need to leave as well.
And we can listen to the recording, Corbett, afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I can stay on for a minute. May I speak out of turn and talk about review the reimbursement process?
Yeah, sure.
Because I think this was something that you brought up, but I can tell you from working remotely, it would be nice to be able to reimburse people electronically. And I think our current accounting system is probably from the 80s or the 90s. Obviously, we can do updates, but it's something, I think it's also the case of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We're not, a computer dependent model. Our revenues come in pretty easily. But I think that a good project would be to research how to, reimburse. Well, I know how to do it, but what it would take to reimburse people more quickly. And again, like you said, it could go in phases. Typically, the first thing would be to you stratify your suppliers to ones that you pay all the time, the board members, the staff, and you move them to EFT funding. That's really all. Sorry, my dog's here. That's, but I think that is something that the FAC should consider, because we're all going to suffer from payments with the way we're doing it now, and that is nobody's fault. It's just the way that, yeah. And I did reach out at the beginning of remote working to our accounting vendor, but sort of stopped because all sorts of other things were happening. But if that's something that the FAC wants to do, I'd be excited to support that project.
Okay. Sorry, the committee, you mean? You said
Yeah,
FIC?
Yeah, FAC.
Okay.
Finance Audit Committee, yes.
That's where I was kind of going with this item too as well. Two things I wanted. One was if there's any kind of information we can get to students to understand, say like, hey, this particular process is very easy for us to quickly reimburse you. Here's some items that make it harder, like, or maybe a medium term reimbursement because we have to do additional checking, things like, just so that students know like why certain things take longer than they should in a more general sense, not necessarily case by case basis. Hopefully that would help them understand, okay, yeah, we should only stick with these types of receipts or these types of event stuff. Along as well as trying to see if there's ways for us to modernize our process so that we can be like, if we need more electronic reimbursements and things like that.
I mean, I look at every invoice and it is quite a rigorous process to get anything reimbursed, and that's fine. Again, it's very this is risky because it is student money, and so we need the minutes approved for certain things. We need original receipts. We need but yeah, we can to be able to document and communicate. I think that would help us with our students who are so now maybe they were waiting a couple of weeks. We do run checks every week, but all the processes that happen to that point and now after that point are significant.
Yes, and with COVID, it adds an extra layer on top of that. So, okay, thank you. I can go to the other points or just myself if you have to head out. Reno?
Yes, I will head out. I will. Okay. I'll see you. And but I do think that it sounds like we can have a pretty good year.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Sorry about the going over time. Well, I think future meetings will be a lot less. Will be more focused on specific things. So go back to what we're talking about. Review. So discuss a fiscal plan development. That was something that Sylvia brought up. I believe she kind of touched on it with the enterprise risk event, the idea of like connecting all these different things together, so that when we have a risk, we can explore it and see how that would impact multiple different areas. But the fiscal plan, she'll have to go into detail on what she meant by this. And so we'll request I'll request a briefing note from her about that. Review SFSS fee options during COVID. So this item, basically, I already started this a little bit with Rowena exploring this idea because we're pushing for lower tuition. SFU, which means also people saying like, hey, why are we paying the SFS or why are we paying the activity fee? What is the activity fee? And so online so far, I've seen board members like Jennifer and others talk about, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what your fees go towards. That's excellent. But if they're probably, if there's another spike or more, we have to do another emergency funding request, another bursary, then there's going to be additional requests of like, hey, we need to, we should reduce in our fees ourselves, like SFS should be. And so I wanted to explore that option to see what we can and can't do. As far as I understand, with the University Act, all fee changes have to be done through referendum, and we only have 2 referendums per year, one in the fall, one in the spring. So we can't do this in the AGM. We can't call a special general meeting and reduce our fees. But I'd also like to have a better, I wanted to clarify that, find someone we can clarify that with, to make sure that we could honestly say, hey, we literally can't change our fees until these dates, and then there's the argument of like, okay, if we do change fees, how does that impact us financially? We are already budgeted to potentially have a $300,000 deficit that might be reducing or increasing based on some information from SFU coming in the next month or so about when students start to fully enroll for the fall. So for most part, I just would like us to do a review and also to see exactly what we can and can't change and how we can and can't change that, so we can communicate that to students. That's really what this is all about. I'd like us to be ahead of this potential situation. Any questions or comments? Asad?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on, I know we did briefly talk about this at the exec meeting, and I think we were we didn't have any like short-term plans, I think, to change fees, because I was under the impression as well that, we would have to put it to membership, and also thinking about, okay, say we do implement a fee change, how is that impacted the long term? Once the COVID crisis has been resolved, if we do decrease our fees, that's going to change, the amount that we do get over the long term, unless we put it to another referendum to increase fees. And I'm pretty sure it'll be more difficult to increase the fees than it is to decrease them as well. So I don't want, like, in the long term to get in a situation where we've put fees down and then are going to have to, fight to bring them back up. And then again, I don't have a lot of the general financial background to know if we did decrease fees, how would that impact us financially. So I think for the short term, let's not make any promises about decreasing our fees, because we are still trying our best to offer all the services that were available already. But thinking about doing a campaign or something to explain to students, this is the fee that we collect, this is exactly how we use it, this is what we're doing in terms of advocacy to get more financial support from the government, from the university, to decrease tuition fees, to suspend penalties on late tuition payments, and all the financial help that we're trying to get, and kind of try to show students that, you are putting money into us, but hopefully you're getting more in return. And yeah, so I'm definitely interested in doing that kind of analysis on how that would impact our financial status in general, before we think about putting it to a referendum, because that's going to be September, late October. That seems I don't know, kind of hasty.
Sure. Okay. Other comments I wanted to make was, and yeah, Jennifer, you said in the chat, the board town hall can increase transparency and show how we're putting the fees to good use, which is very much true. I also believe there's a couple other options we might have available that I want to explore. One is the idea of putting a certain percentage of money into a bursary that then we spread out to students. It wouldn't be very much money if we were trying to get everybody, say, a $7 discount, but it's more symbolic than anything else. That could come from, say, surplus. So we may not have to worry about our budget directly being impacted, like our operating budget. There's also an aspect from historically, from 2015, when they changed the societies, passed the New Societies Act. Originally, they wanted to make student size fees optional. Student size pushed back on this, and the compromise was that student size could select which fees were mandatory, which fees were optional, or could be refunded. And the SFS basically declared, I think, almost pretty much every fee of theirs as mandatory, as prescribed, as they called it. And we could, and that was just done with a simple board motion. So if there's a need, we might be able to loosen up some of the fees to be refundable, whether that's a good thing or bad thing in the sense of like logistics. Like, would it be, because right now if we don't have, say, e-transfer ability for refunding, or it would be really hard for expecting people to physically come up to campus or something, or send through a whole bunch of emails and go through a whole bunch of emails to reimburse people. Would we have to go through SFU? Like, we had to explore this ahead of time. What our options are legally and like logistically. But I'm also much in favor with what Up said, where we should be more showing where they're getting their monies, to see that they're getting their money's worth, as opposed to just looking to cut costs. Because, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Any other comments or questions? No more? Okay. Reporting expectations and content. This was brought up by 7.2 reporting, 7.2.1 expectations and content. This is Sylvia brought this up as part of the agenda. I believe it was something along the lines of like reporting, financial reporting from the administrative side to the committee and probably to the board. And expectations and content was what I was going to ask about. We would have to come up with what we think the report should be, like what's the default reporting structure, plus if there's any additional stuff we'd like to see, and how often we'd like to see this. So I'll ask for more of a briefing note, unless someone has. Okay, you have to head out. So thank you for attending. We're almost finished because most of the other items were admin level submissions. So. Expectations, yeah. So I'll ask for a briefing note, unless people have some initial ideas of how often they like to see reporting happen, like monthly, quarterly, semesterly. So no, so I'll ask for a briefing note on this. And same thing with FIC General State of Affairs. I can give some basic info of what I know ahead of time. The contract with FIC expires in December, I believe, or at least expires in December. We don't know if they will want to renew. This is not an insignificant amount of money that we lose if that's the case. I think we get around a little bit over $300,000 for operating budget plus. And I think more going towards build SFU and a few other of our funds. So we have to start that negotiation in the fall. And we have to plan from the risk side of if they say no, or they want to reduce the fees or increase them or want more for the same amount of money. We will have to explore that. So this is mostly, I think, the idea of just giving us a heads up. That's really about it. Is there any questions or comments about anything? I'm seeing none. Okay, then I will move on to, Kun? Can we give SFS membership to stay through this? Not at the moment. Our challenge is it's a bylaw situation where our bylaws only allow SFU students to be members, and FIC are separate from that. Because also FIC students, when they graduate, they don't necessarily always go to SFU. Sometimes they go to other places. So there's a couple different options, I believe, that we could do. Either we create a separate class of membership for FIC students or similar types of category, like an associate member. I've seen some other nonprofits have this kind of model where it allows them to have additional, like non-traditional membership, alumni and things like that. So we could have some idea of like, hey, if we have an agreement with this organization or service agreement, we can also extend them associate membership ability, and they get various perks for that. The other option is to just modify our membership title to say it could be any FIC or SFU student to be just full members. I would like for things like UPass and stuff, we'd have to look at what the contract language says, that it's something that says, all undergraduate SFU students get a UPass versus all SFS members get a UPass. So that's something we have to explore as well. Because we don't want to put a bylaw change, fight for it, and then find out it doesn't actually help anybody. So that's one option I know of. Yes, exactly, Gabe. So that's going to be the bylaw review will be happening probably pretty much shortly after we finish the governance and administrative review, because our bylaws, we want to make some changes to be approved for the AGM. So we have a time limit on that, and we have to submit to the membership these bylaws at least 21 days in advance and things like that. So we have a lot of work to do. Yeah, happy. I don't have anything about club funding because I don't have numbers. That's one thing we'll have to talk with staff, because the reason why I was able to do research in student unions was because they released a report that says what everyone's core funding is. And I was able to make that. I was able to work with that. But yes, I can release that to you so you can see what at least the student union side looks like and some analysis I did for different funding thresholds and models. So I'll be happy to send that to the committee and to staff and to Min so they can see what I did. I would expect this kind of thing from a timeline perspective would happen in later summer, simply because of all the other stuff on the go with the investment policy, and a few other the audit and stuff. That it will take priority and focus. Any other questions, Poom, or Gabe, or Jennifer? Nope, not seeing none. Just give you a second to type if you need to type anything, Poom. Okay. I will then go move on to 9.1 adjournment. Be it resolved to adjourn the meeting at 11:35 a.m. Do I have a mover?
Jennifer moves.
And seconder?
Poom second.
Thanks. So yeah, Jennifer moves, Poom seconds. All in favor, seeking unanimous consent. If you are dissenting, please unmute your mic. Seeing no dissent, this carries unanimously. Thank you all for attending, and yeah, we don't have quorum. The meeting goes on forever. Yeah, thank you all for attending. I will. My plan for the future is that these meetings will stay on time, and hopefully I'll do my best to manage the agenda ahead of time to make sure that happens. Okay, thank you all, and have a good rest of your days. And you have a good weekend.
Bye, everyone.
How do I turn off the recording on this? Because I don't see a. I'm on my tablet, so I don't necessarily have the ability to turn this off.
I can probably stop it. Oh yeah, here it is.